They said no maid could survive in that mansion, not one. But when Naomi walked through those iron gates with nothing but a nylon bag and the fire in her eyes, she wasn't just fighting for a paycheck, she was fighting for her daughter's life. What happened inside those walls would break the unbreakable Madame Rose, uncover secrets no one dared whisper, and turn enemies into allies. This is the true story of how patience, dignity, and quiet strength transformed a house of fear into a home of hope. They said no maid ever lasted in that house, not one. The gate was grand, the mansion breathtaking, the kind of place that made passers-by slow down just to take it in. But inside? Inside was a battlefield. At the heart of it all stood Madame Rose Richards. Beautiful, polished, and deadly with her words. She slapped without warning, yelled without mercy, and her insults could cut deeper than a whip. She had broken 9 maids in 6 months. Some ran away crying in the middle of the night. Some left without saying a word. One even jumped the back fence barefoot, her belongings still in the small room tucked behind the kitchen. And then Naomi arrived. She came with nothing but a nylon bag, a faded scarf tied neatly over her hair, and the fire in her eyes. Dark-skinned, quiet, deliberate in her movements. She wasn't there to run. She wasn't there to please. She was there for one reason, her daughter Deborah. Deborah, 9 years old, had a heart condition that kept her in and out of the hospital. Bills had piled so high they could crush Naomi if she stopped moving for even a moment. She'd worked in homes before, some kind, some cruel, but never one with a reputation like this. The housekeeper, an older woman named Madame Grace, didn't even bother to greet her. She just pointed to a mop leaning against the marble wall and muttered, "Start with the floors. Madame's coming downstairs." Naomi didn't argue. She tied her scarf tighter, dipped the mop into the bucket, and began to clean. She had already decided in her heart, she could endure whatever came. She had survived worse. The sound came first. Click, clack, click, clack. High heels on marble. Naomi looked up to see her. Madame Rose stood at the top of the stairs in a wine-colored silk robe, one hand holding a steaming cup of tea, the other resting lightly on the banister as though the world itself was beneath her. Her skin was flawless, her hair perfectly set, and the faint trace of expensive perfume filled the air even from where Naomi stood. Her eyes slid from Naomi to the mop, then to the water bucket beside her. Without a word, she tipped the bucket over with the toe of her slipper. The water spread quickly, undoing all Naomi's work. "This is the 3rd time this week someone blocks my walkway," Madame Rose said coldly, her voice calm but dripping with disdain. "I'm not in the mood. Clean it. Now." Naomi's slippers were already soaked, but she simply bent down and began again. She didn't speak. She didn't glare. She just cleaned. From the hallway, one of the other staff whispered, "She won't last. She looks too soft." But Naomi wasn't soft. She was silent fire. That first night, she went to her small staff room, barely large enough for a bed and a broom closet, and whispered to herself in the dark, "Endure. Even if they insult you, endure it. 3 months. That's all. 3 months for Debbie." The next morning, Naomi was up before 5. She swept the front yard, cleaned the glass doors until they gleamed, and mopped the sitting room without a single splash. She was careful, precise. By the time the others shuffled into the kitchen, she was already washing plates beside Mama Ronk, the cook. "You woke early," Mama Ronk said with mild surprise. "I'm just doing my work," Naomi replied softly. The older woman chuckled dryly. "This house, it's not about waking early, it's about surviving Madame's mouth." Right on cue, the soft shuffle of slippers echoed toward them. Madame Rose entered, the silk robe tied snug around her waist, phone in hand. "Where's my lemon water?" she demanded. Mama Ronk started to answer, but Madame Rose's eyes locked on Naomi. "Room temperature. Not cold, not warm. Just right. Do you understand? Yes, Ma, Naomi said. Because if I take one sip and my throat feels like it entered a sauna, you will regret your life. Naomi nodded, picked a clean glass, added 2 slices of lemon, and walked slowly up the marble staircase to deliver it. She placed the tray gently beside Madame Rose. The woman sipped, paused, and then smirked. You're lucky. You got it right. But before Naomi could turn away, Madame Rose added, there's a stain on the bathroom sink. I hate stains. Naomi stepped into the bathroom, saw the faint rust mark likely from a ring, and began to scrub carefully. Her shoulder brushed a perfume bottle, it wobbled. She caught it just in time, her breath catching. When she turned, Madame Rose was standing in the doorway. Without warning, she slapped Naomi hard across the face. You're clumsy, she said coldly. I don't like clumsy people. Naomi's eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She bowed her head, whispered, I'm sorry, Ma, and placed the bottle back in perfect alignment. Mr. Femi Richards, the man of the house, stood silently in the hallway, having witnessed everything. Their eyes met briefly. His carried a flicker of pity. But Naomi didn't want pity. She wanted that paycheck. And in her heart, one truth burned, she would not leave. Not until her daughter had a chance to live. By the 3rd day, Naomi noticed the way the other staff looked at her, curious, almost wary. They had seen new maids arrive before, but they had also seen them leave. Most were gone by day 4 or 5, some without even collecting their pay. Yet Naomi, with her quiet face and steady hands, was still here. It was as if her silence unsettled Madame Rose more than tears ever could. And if there was one thing Madame Rose couldn't stand, it was being ignored. The tests began. First, Naomi returned from cleaning the guest room to find her uniform missing from her cupboard. In its place was a see-through lace nightgown that clearly wasn't hers. The other staff exchanged glances, already guessing the source of the mischief. Naomi didn't flinch. She simply tied her wrapper and put on a faded t-shirt. You're going out like that? The housekeeper gasped. It's clean. It's decent. It's enough, Naomi said simply, and carried on with her duties. Later that morning, Madame Rose came downstairs and eyed her from head to toe. Did you sleep in the gutter, she asked slowly, or are you just dressing to match the mop? A few of the staff chuckled nervously, eyes darting between Naomi and their employer. Naomi bowed her head slightly, picked up the mop, and went back to work. The next test was more deliberate. A glass of red wine spilled, poured, across the white sitting room rug. Naomi had been standing in the doorway when Madame Rose, accidentally, tipped the glass over. Oh, how careless of me, she murmured, watching the crimson soak into the fibers. Naomi didn't ask questions. She grabbed a towel and began blotting the stain, her movements calm and steady. On another day, Madame Rose knocked over a crystal bowl, letting it shatter on the floor. Then, with a raised eyebrow, she said, Naomi, how could you be so careless? Naomi swept up the shards without a word. I'll clean it up, Ma, she said. It was beginning to dawn on the others that this woman wasn't going to break. One evening, Mr. Femi was seated quietly in the garden, a folded newspaper in his hand, when Naomi passed by with a broom. The soft edges of her wrapper were frayed, her slippers had worn thin. Still, her hands moved with a kind of deliberate grace. Naomi, right? He said without looking up. Yes, sir, she answered, stopping to greet him properly. Are they treating you well here? She paused for a beat, then gave a small smile. They're treating me like life treats many of us, sir. But I'll be okay. Mr. Femi studied her for a moment, then nodded, a faint shadow crossing his face. That night, over dinner, he turned to his wife. Why is that girl still here? With the way you've treated her, most would have left by now. Rose took a slow sip of her wine, her lips curling slightly. "She's still useful," she replied. But deep inside, a strange sensation was beginning to grow, a flicker of curiosity she couldn't quite explain. The house had begun to shift. The staff moved with a little less fear. Conversations lasted a little longer. Even the air felt lighter, though no one dared say it aloud. It was a Saturday morning when the first crack appeared in Madame Rose's armor. The clouds outside were heavy, and a soft drizzle tapped against the mansion windows. Naomi was sweeping the east wing hallway when she caught sight of something in the mirror, a figure on the floor. She turned. Madame Rose sat barefoot on the marble, her silk scarf half slipping from her head, makeup smudged, mascara running. A glass of red wine from the night before sat untouched beside her. Her heels were discarded on their sides. For a brief moment, Naomi thought of quietly walking away. This was not her business. But something held her there. She stepped forward slowly. "Ma." Rose's head snapped up. Her voice was sharp but unsteady. "What do you want?" she asked, wiping at her face quickly. Naomi lowered her eyes. "I didn't mean to disturb." She placed a neatly folded clean towel beside her and turned to leave. "Wait." Naomi stopped. Rose studied her with reddened eyes. "Why do you stay?" Naomi hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I need to. For my daughter. You could get another job." "Maybe," Naomi said with a faint smile. "But they won't pay like this one. And my daughter's hospital doesn't accept stories." Something flickered in Rose's gaze. "You're not scared of me?" Naomi took a slow breath. "I used to be scared of life, Ma. But when you've faced death in a hospital ward holding your child's hand, nothing else can really break you again." For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then, in a voice softer than Naomi had ever heard, Rose said, "They said I wasn't good enough." Naomi blinked. "Who, Ma?" "My husband's friends. His family. Even church people. They said I was too young, too flashy, just a trophy wife with no substance." Rose's voice cracked. "I thought if I could control everything, if the house was perfect, if the staff feared me, maybe I'd feel in control of something." Naomi didn't offer advice. She didn't argue. She simply sat down on the floor beside her. Not too close. Not too far. Just, there. For the first time, Madame Rose didn't tell her to leave. Sunday morning dawned with an unusual stillness. The harmattan breeze was soft, and the early light painted the mansion in shades of gold. For the first time since Naomi had arrived, the air inside the house didn't feel like it could crack under the weight of tension. No shouted names echoed down the hallways. No hurried footsteps of staff scurrying to avoid a scolding. Naomi swept the front porch, her movements unhurried, humming quietly to herself, a soft gospel chorus her mother used to sing when the world felt heavy. She didn't even notice Madame Rose standing behind her until the voice came, calm and even. "Is that a gospel song?" Naomi turned, startled. "Yes, Ma. From long ago." Rose gave a slight nod, almost as if she didn't want to admit she recognized it. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back inside. No insult, no sarcastic remark. Just, presence. The other staff noticed immediately. In the kitchen, Mama Ronk whispered to the steward, "She just passed me without shouting about Pepper." The steward frowned. "You're sure she's not sick?" Even Musa, the gateman, remarked later that afternoon, "Auntie Naomi, what did you give Madam to chop? She smiled this morning." Naomi only smiled faintly. "Sometimes people don't need food, Musa. They just need someone not to leave." That evening, Naomi carried Madame Rose's usual evening tea to the master bedroom. She expected to find her on the phone or scrolling through her tablet, issuing orders without looking up. But Rose was sitting by the window, holding a framed photograph of herself and Mr. Femi. Naomi placed the tray gently on the table. "Thank you," Rose said quietly. Naomi froze mid-step. In all her time here, she had never heard those words from her. "You're the first maid who didn't try to impress me," Rose said after a moment. "You just did the work." "I'm not here to impress, Ma," Naomi said softly. "I'm here to survive." Rose studied her, as if seeing her for the first time. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Naomi smiled sadly. "So has everyone, Ma. Some just hide it better." There was a long pause before Rose spoke again. "Tomorrow, take the day off. Visit your daughter. I'll pay for the transport." Naomi's eyes widened. "Ma. You heard me. Go and see her. Come back by evening." It had been 3 weeks since Naomi had last held Deborah. She had been too afraid to ask for leave, knowing how it might be received. Now, here was Madame Rose, her tormentor, offering her not just permission but help. The next morning, Naomi found a small white envelope on her breakfast tray. Inside was 20,000 naira wrapped neatly in tissue. A note in neat handwriting read, "For transport and whatever she might need." Naomi's hands trembled. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, not just for the money, but for the gesture. She boarded a kiki from Ikoyi to Surulere, then a bus to the hospital where Deborah had been under observation. The little girl's face lit up when she saw her mother. "Mommy." Naomi knelt beside the bed, holding her tight. "My baby, I missed you so much." For hours, she fed Deborah, told her stories, not of the house, not of cruelty, but of hope. She brought out a small colorful ribbon she had bought on the roadside. "See what I got you." Deborah grinned. "Mommy, you said you'll bring me home when you get money. Is it soon?" Naomi kissed her forehead. "Very soon, my love. God is helping us. Just hold on." What Naomi didn't know was that Madame Rose had sent her driver to quietly find out where Naomi had gone, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. When the driver returned and confirmed Naomi's visit to the hospital, and the truth about her daughter's condition, Rose said nothing. But later that night, while brushing her hair in the mirror, she thought about Naomi's steady hands, her trembling voice, her refusal to complain. And for the first time in years, Rose felt tears slip silently down her cheeks. Monday morning came with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the mansion's long white curtains. The kitchen smelled faintly of stew as Mama Ronk stirred a pot, humming to herself. There was something different in the air, not loud, not dramatic, but noticeable. Naomi walked into the house with a lighter step than usual. The image of Deborah's smile was still fresh in her mind, warming her from the inside. For the first time in weeks, the weight she carried on her shoulders felt just a little lighter. She tied her apron, picked up her broom, and began sweeping the corridor. The housekeeper passed by and stopped, looking almost startled. You really came back?" she asked. Naomi smiled gently. "I said I would." Before the conversation could continue, Madame Rose's voice drifted down from upstairs, not sharp, not biting, but softer. "Naomi, come, please." The staff froze. No one in the mansion could remember the last time they had heard Rose say please. Naomi climbed the marble stairs, her steps steady. Rose was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair. She looked up briefly, then reached for a white envelope on the table. "This is for Deborah's medication," she said simply. Naomi blinked. "Ma, don't argue. Just take it." Naomi opened the envelope and saw crisp bills, 50,000 naira. Her hands trembled slightly. "You said something that day," Rose continued, her eyes fixed on the mirror. "About how life can break you until nothing scares you anymore." "Yes, Ma." "Well," Rose hesitated, her voice lower now. I think I've been fighting the wrong people. Naomi met her gaze in the reflection. Pain makes us do things, Ma. But it doesn't have to make us cruel. Those words lingered in the air between them, soft yet heavy. That afternoon, the kitchen witnessed the first open sign of change. Rose walked in, her heels clicking softly against the tiles. "Mama Ronk," she said. The cook nearly dropped her spoon. "Yes, Ma. Your stew smells nice. What leaf did you use today?" Mama Ronk stammered. Just scent leaf and crayfish, Ma." Rose nodded. "It's good. Thank you." By evening, even Mr. Femi had noticed. Sitting in the living room with his newspaper, he watched his wife pass by without a single sharp word to anyone. His eyes shifted to Naomi, who was polishing the glass table. "Naomi," he said. She looked up. "Yes, sir." "Thank you." "For what, sir?" "For staying. You've done something no one else could." Naomi bowed her head slightly and returned to her work, but inside her chest, her heart swelled. She had not come here to change anyone. But somehow, quietly, she was. 2 weeks passed. In those days, the mansion seemed to shed its old skin. No shouting, no broken glass, no stiff silence that made every footstep feel like trespassing. The staff smiled more. The gardener even sang while trimming the hedges. And the biggest change of all? Madame Rose herself. She no longer barked orders. She said, "Please," and "Thank you," without hesitation. She began asking Naomi about Deborah, how she was feeling, if she was eating well, if she liked to read. Then one Thursday evening, Rose did something no one could have imagined. She called Naomi into the living room. "Dress well tomorrow," she said. Naomi frowned. "Ma? You're coming with me somewhere." "Where?" "To my women's luncheon." Naomi's eyes widened. "Ma, I can't go to that kind of event." "Yes, you can," Rose said calmly. "You'll just come with me. I want you there. There are some women I need to introduce you to, doctors, NGO workers. One of them runs a health foundation. She may be able to help with Deborah's treatment." Naomi's lips parted, but no words came. "I already bought you something," Rose continued. "It's on your bed." When Naomi returned to her room, there it was, a soft peach-colored gown, simple but elegant, folded neatly beside a matching headscarf. She sat on the bed and ran her fingers over the fabric, her chest tightening with a wave of emotion. She had entered this house with nothing but a nylon bag. Now she was being handed not just clothes, but a chance. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with a strange anticipation. The driver had polished the black SUV until it gleamed like obsidian under the soft morning light. Inside the house, the staff moved briskly but without the usual edge of fear. Today felt different. Naomi stood in front of the small mirror in her staff quarters, her hands smoothing the peach gown over her hips. It fit perfectly, not too tight, not too loose, and the matching headscarf framed her face in a way she hadn't seen in years. For a moment, she didn't look like the maid anymore. She looked like a woman who belonged anywhere she stepped. There was a gentle knock at the door. It was Mama Ronk, holding a small pair of gold earrings. "Wear these," she said with a proud smile. "Today, you are representing all of us." Naomi's throat tightened as she took them. "Thank you, Mama." When she stepped outside, the driver was already waiting. Madame Rose emerged from the main entrance wearing an emerald green silk dress, her hair in a sleek chignon, diamond studs in her ears. Without a word, she gestured for Naomi to follow. The SUV's leather seats smelled faintly of rose and vanilla. As the car glided out of the gates, Naomi couldn't help but notice how people on the street turned to look. She'd ridden in buses, kikis, and okadas all her life, but never like this, sitting beside the woman who had once been her tormentor. They arrived at a high-end restaurant overlooking the lagoon. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open the doors. The women inside were just as Naomi had imagined, dressed in expensive fabrics, hair perfectly coiffed, their manicures gleaming as they held champagne flutes. Heads turned when Madame Rose entered, Naomi by her side. There were whispers, curious glances. Rose ignored them all. At one of the round tables, a tall woman in a cream blazer stood to greet her. "Rose. It's been too long." They exchanged polite air kisses before Rose turned slightly. "This is Naomi," she said clearly. "She's stronger than most women I know, and her daughter is a fighter." Naomi felt the heat rise to her cheeks. The woman's eyes softened. "I run a children's heart foundation," she said. "Maybe we can help. Send me her details." For a moment, Naomi was frozen, her hands clasped together tightly in front of her. "Thank you, Ma," she whispered. Throughout the luncheon, Naomi stayed quiet, watching the swirl of conversations around her. But every now and then, Rose would draw her in, introducing her to a doctor here, an NGO director there, planting seeds that Naomi could barely believe were being sown on her behalf. By the time they returned to the mansion, Naomi felt as though the air she breathed was different, lighter, filled with possibility. The following Monday morning, Naomi was in the kitchen peeling yam when her small Nokia phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" she said cautiously. "Good morning. Is this Miss Naomi, mother of Deborah?" Her heart skipped. "Yes, this is she. This is Dr. Adijua from the Children's Cardiac Foundation. Madame Rose referred you to us after the luncheon last week." Naomi stood slowly, the yam peeler slipping from her hand and clattering onto the counter. "Yes, doctor, I remember her telling me something. Well, we've reviewed your daughter's case, her test results, her records, and we'd like to sponsor her next 2 procedures fully, at no cost." For a heartbeat, Naomi couldn't speak. I'm sorry, Ma, what did you say?" "You heard me, Ma. We'll cover the surgeries, transport, medications, everything. We'll even assign a pediatric nurse to follow up after her surgery." Naomi's knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you." Mama Ronk rushed in, alarmed. "What happened?" Naomi looked up, her voice trembling but radiant. "They're paying for Deborah's surgery. Everything." Within minutes, the kitchen was buzzing, staff cheering, clapping, embracing her. Even the driver, coming in to collect keys, paused and grinned. "Naomi, you mean it?" Naomi nodded, still crying. "Madame Rose, she made it happen." That evening, Naomi brought Rose her evening tea. She set the tray down quietly, intending to slip out, but Rose's voice stopped her. "Did they call?" Naomi turned slowly. "Yes, Ma. This afternoon." Her eyes filled again. "They're paying for everything. Deborah can have the surgery. She might live." Rose's gaze softened. "I told you not to thank me." "I have to," Naomi said, wiping her tears. "Because you didn't have to help. But you did." Rose looked away for a moment before murmuring, "Helping you helped me." Naomi frowned slightly. "I don't understand." Rose's lips curved in a small, almost shy smile. "I used to think strength was controlling everything. But I watched you, suffer quietly, serve gently, and still smile. You reminded me what real strength is." From that day forward, Naomi noticed the difference, not just in Rose, but in everyone. The housekeeper began asking for her opinion. Musa, the gateman, started greeting her with a proud, "Auntie Naomi, good morning." On paper, she was still a maid. But in truth, she had become the heart of the home. 2 weeks later, the hospital room was filled with the steady rhythm of machines, quiet beeps and soft hums. Deborah lay wrapped in pink sheets, her tiny chest rising and falling in smooth, even breaths. A small bandage covered the scar near her sternum, the only visible sign of the life-changing surgery she had just endured. Naomi had barely left her side since the procedure. She slept in the hard visitor's chair, prayed through the nights, and whispered words of comfort whenever Deborah stirred. Every time the doctor came in for a checkup, Naomi braced herself, afraid of hearing bad news. But each time, the words brought relief. "She's doing well. The worst is over." By the third morning, Deborah's eyes were brighter, her voice less faint. Naomi knew she needed to return to the mansion, her work, her responsibilities, but leaving her daughter was like tearing a piece of herself away. She knelt by the bed, brushing her hand over Deborah's hair. "Mommy will be back soon, my angel. Rest well." Deborah squeezed her fingers. "Bring me a storybook when you come." Naomi smiled. "I will." When she reached the mansion gates later that morning, Musa, the gateman, stood tall, his usual grin even wider. "Auntie Naomi, welcome. We have been waiting." She stepped inside, noticing something unusual. The compound looked freshly washed, the flowers neatly trimmed, the air almost festive. As she approached the main entrance, she realized why. Every member of the staff was gathered in the front yard. The gardener, the steward, the cleaner, even Mama Ronk stood at the center, beaming like a proud auntie at a family celebration. Before Naomi could speak, the front door opened. Madame Rose stepped out, not in her silk robes, not with her perfect makeup, but in a calm blue gown, her face bare, her smile genuine. "Naomi," she said softly. "Welcome back." Naomi bowed her head slightly. "Thank you, Ma. I have something to show you." She led Naomi to a small table set under the mango tree. On it sat a framed document wrapped in clear plastic. Rose lifted it and handed it to her. Naomi peeled back the wrap, and froze. "Promotion letter, head of household operations." Her breath caught. "You've earned it," Rose said. "You'll oversee the staff now. Better pay, better quarters, and full medical support for Deborah, moving forward." Naomi's lips parted, but no words came. "Why me, Ma?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. Rose's answer was simple. "Because you did what no one else could. You didn't just clean the house, you cleaned the air, the fear, the pain. And you stayed, even when I gave you every reason to leave." Naomi's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Make we celebrate small." Mama Ronk called out, laughing as she brought forward a tray of small chops. The staff clapped and cheered. Even Mr. Femi emerged from the house, walking up to Naomi with his hand extended. "You have done well, Naomi. Thank you for bringing peace to my home." Naomi shook his hand, unable to keep her tears from spilling. But this time, they weren't tears of pain, they were tears of honor. That evening, Naomi walked into her new quarters. Gone was the cramped little room she used to share with mops and buckets. Now she had her own space, a fresh coat of paint, a small fan that worked, a soft mattress that didn't sag in the middle. But the part that moved her most wasn't the furniture. It was the feeling. For the first time in a long time, Naomi was living somewhere she wasn't just tolerated, she was valued. The staff treated her differently now. They didn't just greet her, they greeted her first. The housekeeper consulted her on schedules. Even Musa, the gateman, stood straighter when speaking to her. And yet, the greatest shift of all was in Madame Rose. She no longer spoke to Naomi with that icy edge. She asked about Deborah regularly, what she ate, if she was comfortable, when she'd return to school. Sometimes, she'd even smile when Naomi walked into the room. But one night, something happened that would change Naomi's understanding of her completely. It was late. Naomi was in the kitchen, packing leftover rice into containers for the staff, when she heard soft footsteps. She turned to see Madame Rose, not in heels, not in silk, but barefoot in her robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Do you have a minute?" Rose asked quietly. Naomi nodded. They walked out to the back patio, where the moonlight spilled over the garden. The air was still, the scent of night flowers heavy in the breeze. Rose leaned against the railing. "Do you know? I was once a housemaid too." Naomi's eyes widened. "Ma. I was 13. My mother had died. My father, well, he wasn't much of a father. I ended up working in a rich man's house in Enugu. His wife hated me. She didn't hit me, she didn't shout, but she made sure I felt like I didn't belong. Like I was a stray dog she'd taken in out of pity." Naomi's heart ached at the image. "I told myself," Rose continued, "that one day I would be the madam. That I'd never be weak again. That no one would ever treat me small. And I became that. Strong. Cold. Sharp. I thought that was power." She looked away, her voice quieter. "When I met you, I saw something else. You reminded me of the girl I buried a long time ago, the girl who cried quietly while cleaning someone else's floor. You didn't fight with pride. You fought with patience." There was a long silence before she added, "I'm sorry, Naomi. For everything." Naomi reached out, gently resting her hand over Rose's. "Sometimes God doesn't take us through fire to burn us, Ma. He takes us through to make us light for others still in the dark." Rose didn't speak. But she didn't pull her hand away either. For a long moment, they sat there under the moon, two women from different worlds, bound by pain, changed by understanding. It was a bright Friday morning when Naomi got the call she had been praying for. Deborah was ready to be discharged. Naomi's hands shook as she folded her cleanest wrapper, tucked it under her arm, and hurried to the hospital. The taxi ride felt endless. Every traffic light seemed to take a lifetime to change. When she finally arrived at the ward, Deborah was sitting up in bed, wearing a yellow dress someone from the hospital charity had gifted her. Her cheeks were rounder now, her eyes brighter, her smile radiant. The tiny scar near her chest was the only visible proof of what she had endured. To Naomi, it was a badge of survival. "Mommy!" Deborah cried, flinging her arms around her mother. Naomi hugged her tightly, inhaling the scent of soap and hope. "My baby," she whispered, "let's go home." The journey back to the mansion felt surreal. Naomi had imagined it countless times, but she had never expected what awaited her. As the taxi rolled into the compound, she noticed something unusual. The driveway was swept spotless. Fresh flowers had been arranged near the steps. The air buzzed with anticipation. When Musa opened the gate, his grin nearly split his face. "Auntie Naomi, welcome. We have been waiting." Naomi stepped out of the car, holding Deborah's hand. The little girl's eyes darted around, curious. Then she saw it. Under the mango tree, a table was set up with juice, chin-chin, and puff-puff neatly arranged on trays. Mama Ronk was standing beside a large pot of jollof rice, fried plantain stacked high on a platter. The cleaner had brought out chairs. Even Musa had strung up makeshift balloons, blown gloves tied together with string. And at the center of it all stood Madame Rose, wearing a soft pink gown and the kind of smile Naomi had never seen on her before. Rose walked forward slowly and knelt down in front of Deborah. In her hands was a small wrapped gift. "This is for you," she said gently. "Your mother told me you like reading. I thought we could start a story together." Deborah accepted it shyly, her fingers tracing the wrapping. "Thank you, Ma." Rose smiled warmly. "Call me Auntie Rose." Naomi stood still, her throat tightening. Once, these were the hands that had slapped her for spilling water. Now they were gently tucking a curl of hair behind her daughter's ear. Mr. Femi stepped forward next, clearing his throat. "I don't say much in this house," he began, "but I must say this, Naomi, you have reminded us all what true strength looks like." He turned to Deborah. "You are always welcome here, my dear. This is your second home now." The staff clapped, their voices rising in celebration. Deborah beamed, clutching her new book to her chest. Naomi turned to Rose, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to thank you." Rose shook her head. "You already did. You didn't leave." As the sun climbed higher and the yard filled with laughter, Naomi realized something profound. The mansion on Bishop Adme Drive, once known for silence and shouting, now echoed with joy, family, and light. And it had all begun because one woman refused to walk away. Weeks passed, and Deborah began to grow stronger with each day. The once frail little girl who could barely walk without losing her breath was now chasing the gardener's chickens across the lawn, her laughter carrying through the open windows of the mansion. At first, Naomi worried about bringing her daughter to the house too often. Old habits of caution still lingered, memories of Madame Rose's temper were not easily erased. But Rose's invitations were genuine. "Bring her," she would say over breakfast. "Let her sit with us. She needs to be around joy while she heals." And so Deborah came, sometimes spending whole afternoons curled up on a cushion in the sitting room with her new storybook, occasionally looking up to watch her mother work. Rose would wander in, sit beside her, and start folding napkins or arranging flowers, teaching her with the patience of a woman who had once been known for anything but. The staff began treating Deborah as if she were a younger sister to them all. Mama Ronk kept aside the sweetest plantains for her plate. Musa taught her how to whistle through a blade of grass. The cleaner, Uche, made her little paper fans when the afternoons grew hot. But the biggest change was in Rose herself. One evening, Naomi sat in the kitchen peeling oranges, the sound of Deborah humming faintly drifting from the sitting room. Rose stepped in quietly, holding 2 cups of chilled zobo. She set one in front of Naomi and pulled out a chair. "You know," Rose began, her voice calm, "the day I slapped you, I was sure you'd leave like the others. In fact, I wanted you to leave. I didn't want anyone looking too closely at who I really was under all the pride." Naomi looked up, her hands stilling over the orange. "But now," Rose continued with a faint smile, "I thank God you didn't leave." She took a slow sip before adding, "You weren't just a maid here. You were the mirror I was too scared to look into, and the comfort I didn't even know I needed." Naomi's eyes shimmered. "And you gave my daughter a second chance at life. I'll never forget that." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the faint clinking of spoons in the distance and Deborah's laughter from the other room. As the weeks rolled on, Naomi noticed subtle things, Rose smiling more often, staff voices no longer hushed, footsteps no longer wary. The marble floors of the mansion still gleamed, but now they carried the echoes of something new, belonging. One afternoon, as Naomi was arranging fresh lilies in a vase, she caught a glimpse of Rose in the garden, watering the hibiscus with Deborah at her side, both of them laughing as water splashed over their feet. Naomi paused, watching them for a moment. She had come into this house with nothing but a nylon bag, desperation, and silence. Now, she had respect, trust, and a bond she never imagined possible. But she also knew that life had a way of testing peace, and deep inside, she wondered if this new chapter could truly last. The first test to their newfound peace came unexpectedly. It started on a humid Wednesday afternoon. The sun blazed overhead, and the mansion was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Naomi was in the laundry room folding freshly pressed linens when she heard the faint echo of voices drifting down the corridor. One was Rose's, low and sharp in tone, though not raised. The other was a man's voice, unfamiliar, slick with condescension. Naomi didn't mean to listen, but the words carried just enough to stop her hands mid-fold. "You've gone soft, Rose," the man was saying. "When Femi married you, you ran this house like a military camp. Now you're playing house with the help." There was a pause before Rose replied, her voice even but laced with steel. "Careful with your words, Colonel." "I'm just saying," the man continued, "people talk. The staff don't fear you anymore. That maid, what's her name? Naomi, I hear she walks around here like she owns the place." Naomi's chest tightened. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Rose said. "Oh, I do," Colonel insisted. "Power is perception. And if the perception is that the madam has befriended the maid, you've lost control. What will Femi's friends think? What will the society women say?" Naomi could almost hear the smirk in his voice. There was a long silence before Rose spoke again. Her voice was quieter now, but there was something in it Naomi had never heard before, a kind of conviction. "I don't care what they think," Rose said. "Naomi stays." Naomi's breath caught. She stepped back quickly, pretending to busy herself with the linens when footsteps approached. Colonel passed by first, his cologne strong and his eyes scanning her with thinly veiled disdain. "So you're the famous Naomi," he muttered under his breath. She bowed her head politely but didn't answer. A few moments later, Rose appeared. She didn't say anything at first, simply picking up a neatly folded towel from the counter and placing it on the stack. "You heard?" she asked without looking up. Naomi hesitated. "I didn't mean to, Ma." Rose finally met her eyes. "Good. Then you know, I don't bend to gossip. And I don't drop the people who've earned their place here." Naomi felt a quiet strength rise in her chest. "Thank you, Ma." But Colonel's words didn't vanish so easily. Over the next week, Naomi noticed subtle changes. When she went to the market with the driver, two of the women from Rose's social circle were there, whispering behind manicured hands. In the kitchen, the steward mentioned overhearing a conversation in which someone called her the maid who's gotten too comfortable. It was a reminder that while the atmosphere in the mansion had changed, the world outside hadn't. One Saturday, Naomi was preparing tea for Rose when she heard Deborah giggling in the sitting room. She stepped out to find Rose teaching her how to arrange flowers, a skill Naomi had never seen Rose share with anyone. For a brief moment, Naomi forgot the whispers, the gossip, the threat of disapproval. All she saw was her daughter smiling, and Rose, once the source of her deepest humiliation, smiling back. It was then she understood something: this peace wasn't given. It was built. And like anything worth building, it would have to be defended. The pressure didn't take long to escalate. It came in the form of the annual Bishop Admi Charity Gala, an event dripping with prestige, where every wealthy family in Banana Island attended to parade their influence under the guise of philanthropy. The Richards were on the hosting committee, and as always, Madame Rose's appearance would be scrutinized from the glitter of her gown to the sharpness of her smile. 2 weeks before the event, Rose was in the living room with Naomi, going over the menu for the post-gala dinner when her phone rang. She answered, her tone polite but clipped. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Adeyemi." Naomi kept working, but the conversation soon slowed her hands. "Yes, of course I'm bringing Femi." "No, I haven't chosen a gown yet." Rose's voice lowered. "What do you mean by that?" A pause. "Mrs. Adeyemi, Naomi is not just the maid. She..." Rose stopped, listening. Her jaw tightened. "With respect, my household is my business. I don't run it based on whispers." She hung up without saying goodbye, her expression unreadable. Naomi kept her eyes down, but Rose noticed. "Another reminder," she said, "that some people will always measure you by their yardstick, not your worth." The day of the gala arrived in a storm of preparation. Staff hurried to iron gowns, polish shoes, and arrange last-minute flower deliveries. Rose emerged from her room in a floor-length sapphire dress, her hair swept up, diamonds glittering at her ears. Naomi was helping with the final touches in the foyer when Rose glanced at her and said, "You're coming tonight." Naomi froze. "Ma?" "You're coming," Rose repeated, her tone leaving no room for debate. "In the gold gown in your quarters. It will fit you." Naomi's instinct was to refuse. She had never attended such an event, never stood in rooms where wealth dripped from every corner. But she also knew that saying no to Rose when her mind was made up was like telling the ocean to turn back. That evening, the gala hall sparkled with chandeliers and the low murmur of high society. Naomi walked in beside Rose and Mr. Femi, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes sweep over her. Whispers followed them like shadows. Near the bar, Naomi caught sight of Cunnel, the same man who had called her a liability, leaning toward a small group of women, his lips curling in a smug smile. She didn't have to hear the words to know who they were about. But before she could look away, Rose's voice rang clear enough to hush the air around them. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, addressing a cluster of society women who had gathered to greet her, "I want you to meet someone." She turned, placing a hand lightly on Naomi's shoulder. "This is Naomi, my head of household operations and the reason my home runs as it does. She's also the mother of a brave young girl who just survived a major heart surgery." There was a beat of silence, then the faintest smile tugged at Rose's lips. "If you're going to talk about her, let's make sure you get the story right." Some of the women murmured polite greetings. Others shifted uncomfortably. But no one dared contradict her. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks, not the burn of humiliation, but the warmth of being defended, openly, in a room where appearances meant everything. Later, as they left the gala, Naomi whispered, "You didn't have to do that." Rose gave a small, almost mischievous smile. "Yes, I did. Let them know exactly where I stand." That night, Naomi lay awake in her quarters, the events replaying in her mind. For months, she had fought to endure in silence. Now, someone was speaking for her, loud enough for the whole world to hear. The morning after the gala, the mansion seemed quieter than usual, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Naomi moved through the kitchen, preparing Rose's lemon water, but she noticed the subtle difference in how the staff looked at her, more open, more assured. News of what Rose had done the previous night had traveled fast. By mid-morning, Mama Ronk cornered her near the pantry. "So it's true?" she asked, eyes wide. "Madam defended you in front of all those big people?" Naomi smiled faintly. "She introduced me. Told them I was head of household operations." Mama Ronk laughed, shaking her head. "Ah. That woman surprises me every day now. You've turned this house upside down." But not everyone was pleased. Around noon, Cunnel appeared at the gate in his glossy SUV, striding into the mansion without so much as a greeting to Musa. Naomi was dusting the console table in the hallway when she heard his voice carrying from the sitting room. "Rose, what on earth was that last night?" Rose's tone was calm. "Clarify yourself, Cunnel. You paraded your maid in front of everyone like she was an equal. People are talking. You made yourself look soft." Naomi kept dusting, pretending not to hear, but her grip on the cloth tightened. "Then let them talk," Rose said coolly. Cunnel scoffed. "This isn't about them. It's about you. You're losing the authority you used to have. First it's one maid. Then it's the cook. Soon, the whole house will think they can cross you." For a moment, there was silence. Then Rose's voice came, sharp enough to cut glass. "You mistake fear for respect, Cunnel. I used to make that mistake too." Cunnel muttered something Naomi couldn't catch, then his footsteps stormed toward the door. He passed her without looking, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed. When Naomi brought the lemon water to Rose a few minutes later, Rose was standing by the window, looking out at the garden. "Do you regret what you said last night?" Naomi asked quietly. Rose turned, her expression softening. "Not for a second. You've earned your place here, Naomi. And anyone who can't see that can find their way out of my life." The sincerity in her tone made Naomi's chest ache. She'd spent so long enduring cruelty and indifference that moments like this felt almost unreal. Over the next few days, Rose's actions matched her words. She involved Naomi in household decisions that had nothing to do with cleaning, choices about vendors, schedules for events, even what flowers to plant in the garden. It wasn't just responsibility, it was trust. But Rose's public loyalty also meant Naomi had stepped into a spotlight she'd never asked for. When she went to the market, she noticed people watching her longer than usual. Some smiled politely. Others looked at her as if they were trying to figure out what gave her the right to stand beside someone like Madame Rose Richards. One evening, as Naomi and Deborah were sitting under the mango tree, Deborah reading aloud from her storybook, Rose joined them with 3 cups of Zobo. She listened to Deborah finish a page before speaking. "You know," Rose said, looking at Naomi, "I've been thinking about starting something." Naomi tilted her head. "Something?" "A foundation," Rose replied. "For girls who start life the way I did, and the way you did. Training, education, job placement. Real opportunities. I have the means, but I'll need someone I trust to help run it." Naomi's eyes widened. "Ma, that's..." Rose interrupted gently. "Don't answer yet. Just think about it. But if you say yes, Naomi, this could be bigger than this house, bigger than us." Naomi sat in stunned silence, the hum of crickets filling the space between them. She had come here to endure for 3 months, to earn enough to pay hospital bills. Now, she was being asked to help change the lives of others like her. It was the first time in years Naomi allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival. Naomi didn't give Rose an answer right away. That night, after Deborah had fallen asleep in the small bed in her quarters, Naomi sat by the window with the foundation proposal turning over in her mind. She thought of her early years, of the long days scrubbing floors in houses where her name was never remembered, of employers who treated her like she was invisible until she made a mistake, of the coldness she'd learned to swallow without flinching. She thought of the younger women she'd worked beside over the years, some barely teenagers, many of them broken before they even had a chance to live. The thought of being able to give them something more than survival stirred something deep in her chest. But with it came fear. She wasn't a businesswoman. She wasn't educated beyond secondary school. Could she really stand in boardrooms or speak to donors? Could she be more than the quiet strength she'd been in this house? Her answer had to wait, because life had a way of testing her resolve before she could speak it. 2 days later, as Naomi was leaving the market with Musa, her old employer's daughter spotted her. Amanda. She was dressed in designer jeans, her phone in hand, a smirk pulling at her lips. Well, Amanda said, stepping closer. "If it isn't Naomi. I heard you've upgraded from scrubbing our floors to polishing the madam's shoes over on Bishop Admi Drive." Musa stiffened beside her, but Naomi's face stayed calm. "Good afternoon, Miss Amanda." Amanda laughed lightly. "Still so proper. I suppose she hasn't slapped the obedience out of you yet? Or maybe you're her little pet project now. The gossip is everywhere." Naomi didn't take the bait. "Have a good day, Miss Amanda." She turned and walked toward the car, Musa trailing protectively behind. But that encounter followed her home like a shadow. She had thought the whispers were contained to Rose's social circle, but now it was clear they had seeped into the wider community. That evening, Naomi was quiet during dinner. Deborah noticed. "Mommy, are you okay?" Naomi forced a smile. "I'm fine, my love." Rose noticed too. When Naomi came to clear the dishes later, she said, "What happened today?" Naomi hesitated, then told her. Rose's eyes hardened. "Let me tell you something, Naomi. When I started climbing in this world, people lined up to remind me where I came from. They thought it was an insult. I made it my crown. The people who try to drag you back are already behind you. Don't slow down to argue with them. Naomi let the words sink in. She had spent her life pushing forward for Deborah's sake, but what if pushing forward now meant carrying others with her? The next morning, she found Rose in the garden, inspecting the new hibiscus blooms. "Ma," Naomi said, her voice steady, "about the foundation. I'll help you." Rose looked up, a smile blooming slowly across her face. "Good. We start planning next week." In that moment, Naomi realized something important. She wasn't saying yes just to Rose. She was saying yes to herself, to the woman she had fought to become, and to the women she wanted to lift alongside her. The following week, the mansion became more than just a home, it became a planning ground. Rose cleared out the smaller of the two studies, having the staff dust and polish it until the mahogany shelves gleamed. A large table was brought in, along with a pair of leather chairs. "This will be our foundation office for now," Rose said, sliding a folder toward Naomi. "We start here before moving to a formal space." Naomi opened the folder and saw pages of handwritten notes, printed reports, and lists of potential contacts. It was overwhelming: names of NGOs, projected budgets, proposals for training programs. "Don't look at the whole mountain," Rose advised. "Just the next step in front of you. You've already climbed harder ones." The first step was reaching out to women in the staff network, maids, cleaners, and cooks in other wealthy homes, inviting them for a meeting about the foundation's vision. Naomi wrote the letters herself, her handwriting careful and neat. Musa was sent to deliver them discreetly. But not everyone in the mansion welcomed this change. By midweek, whispers began circulating among the staff. The steward, Emmanuel, muttered to the housekeeper when he thought Naomi couldn't hear. "All this talk of foundation and meetings, she'll start thinking she's the madam herself." Uche, the cleaner, was more direct. "Naomi, I hope this doesn't mean you'll forget where you came from. Some people change when they climb." Naomi kept her voice calm. "I'm not climbing alone, Uche. That's the point." Still, their words stung. She had worked side by side with these people for months, endured the same cold mornings and long hours. She had hoped they would see her success as something they could share. One evening, while Naomi was organizing files in the new office, Rose walked in and shut the door. "You've been quieter these past few days. Tell me why." Naomi hesitated, then explained the tension. Rose listened without interrupting, her gaze steady. "This is your first lesson," Rose said when Naomi finished. "The higher you rise, the more some people will resent the fact that you didn't stay where they left you. But you don't dim your light to keep others comfortable. You shine brighter so they can see their own way forward." The words settled deep in Naomi's chest. She had been afraid of seeming like she'd forgotten her place, but maybe her place had simply changed. The day of the first foundation meeting arrived. 10 women gathered in the study, their eyes curious, some skeptical, others hopeful. Naomi stood at the front, her hands clasped together. "I'm not here to give you speeches," she began. "I'm here to tell you what's possible. I've been where you are, tired, unsure if tomorrow will be any better. But I've learned that patience can open doors that anger can't. And when those doors open, we must walk through, not just for ourselves, but for the women behind us." She saw heads nodding, eyes softening. By the end of the meeting, several women had signed up for the first training program. That night, Naomi sat in her quarters with Deborah asleep beside her, feeling the weight of what had begun. The work ahead would be hard, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was building something bigger than herself. The momentum of the foundation's launch carried Naomi forward like a strong tide. Within weeks, more women joined the network: maids, laundry workers, nannies, and cooks from homes across the island. They came to the mansion on their days off, sometimes clutching notebooks, sometimes just carrying the weight of their own stories. Naomi poured herself into the work. She coordinated skills workshops with Rose's contacts, basic bookkeeping, English classes, and lessons on workers' rights. The small study that Rose had converted into an office was now alive with activity, the air warm with possibility. But success has a way of attracting shadows. One Wednesday afternoon, as Naomi was reviewing attendance sheets, Rose walked in with a letter in her hand. Her face was unreadable. "This came for you," she said, placing it on the desk. Naomi frowned, recognizing the neat but unfamiliar handwriting. She opened the envelope and read. "Miss Naomi. We hear you are recruiting workers from our homes without permission. This is unprofessional and will not be tolerated. Some of us will be speaking to your madam about ending this foundation, before it embarrasses her further." There was no signature, just a flourish of initials Naomi didn't recognize. She set the letter down slowly. "They think I'm stealing staff," she said quietly. Rose's eyes flashed. "They think too small. They see women stepping forward and they panic." Still, the accusation spread quickly. The following week, 2 women who had signed up for the program sent word they couldn't attend anymore. "Madam said it's not good for the house." Another participant confided to Naomi that her employer had threatened to fire her if she kept coming. Naomi felt a sick twist in her stomach. Was this how it would end? Not with failure, but with fear? One night, after Deborah had fallen asleep, Naomi sat under the mango tree staring at the quiet mansion. She thought about the months she'd spent here, every insult endured, every floor mopped, every moment she'd chosen patience over pride. If she could survive that, could she really let gossip dismantle what she'd built? The next morning, Naomi walked into Rose's room, a folder in her hand. "Ma, I want to hold an open house." Rose raised an eyebrow. "Open house?" "Yes," Naomi said firmly. "Invite the employers. Let them see what we're doing. Show them it's not about taking their staff, it's about making their staff better at what they do, and giving them the chance for a better future. If they see it for themselves, maybe they'll stop fighting it." Rose studied her for a moment, then smiled slowly. "That's bold. I like it." Preparations began immediately. Invitations were sent, not just to the women's employers, but to key figures in the community, including some of Rose's most vocal critics. The staff polished the mansion from top to bottom. Mama Ronk prepared trays of puff puff and samosas. Naomi rehearsed her talking points late into the night. The day of the open house, the living room buzzed with chatter. Employers in fine lace and crisp suits sat alongside their staff, curiosity written across their faces. Naomi stood at the front, her peach headscarf catching the light. "This foundation," she began, "isn't here to take anyone away from their work. It's here to give them skills that make them better, more confident, and more valuable to the homes they serve, and to themselves." She spoke of dignity, of opportunity, of breaking cycles that kept people trapped in the same place for years. She introduced women who had already learned new skills through the program, letting them share their experiences in their own voices. By the time the event ended, the mood in the room had shifted. A few employers even approached Naomi to ask how they could support the initiative. That night, Rose found Naomi in the office, carefully stacking the leftover pamphlets. "You didn't just defend yourself today," Rose said. "You proved them wrong without raising your voice. That's the kind of leadership people remember." Naomi smiled faintly. "I learned from the best, Ma." The weeks after the open house felt different, not just in the mansion, but in the way Naomi moved through the world. The letters of complaint stopped arriving. Instead, Rose's desk began to fill with small notes of thanks from employers whose staff had returned home with new skills and a renewed sense of pride. One Saturday morning, Naomi arrived early to prepare for a workshop on basic accounting. As she arranged the chairs, she noticed Deborah in the corner, stacking notebooks for the attendees. Her daughter's energy was brighter these days, her cheeks full of color. Naomi watched her for a moment, a quiet swell of gratitude rising in her chest. The women trickled in, maids, nannies, cooks, chatting in low tones until the trainer began. Naomi stood at the back, observing. She saw the same guarded expressions she'd worn when she first arrived at the mansion, and she recognized the slow spark of hope that began to replace them as they listened, learned, and realized someone believed in their worth. Later that afternoon, when the session ended, Rose walked into the study wearing a simple blue dress, her hair loose. She glanced around at the women packing their bags and smiled. "This is just the beginning," she said to Naomi, handing her a sealed envelope. Naomi opened it and found an official document, the registration certificate for the Deborah Foundation. Naomi's eyes widened. You named it after her?" Rose's smile deepened. "She's the reason you stayed. She's the reason this exists. And maybe one day, she'll run it herself." Naomi's throat tightened. "Ma, I don't have words." "You don't need words," Rose replied softly. "You've been speaking through your actions since the day you walked into this house." The following weekend, the mansion's garden was transformed for the foundation's formal launch. White tents were set up under the mango tree. There were speeches from local leaders, music from a small live band, and trays of food prepared by the staff who now worked with pride instead of fear. As the sun dipped low, Naomi stood on the small stage with Deborah beside her, the crowd of women, staff, and community members gathered below. She looked out and saw Musa grinning in the back, Mama Ronk dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and Rose standing tall at the front, her expression filled with quiet pride. Naomi took a breath. "I came to this house with nothing but a nylon bag and the hope that I could keep my daughter alive. I never imagined I would find family here, or that the woman I feared most would become my greatest ally. This foundation is proof that patience can turn enemies into partners, and that staying, when it's worth staying, can change everything." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "If you remember nothing else from today, remember this: strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to keep going, even when the world dares you to stop." The applause rose like a wave. Deborah squeezed her hand. "Mommy, are you happy?" Naomi looked down at her daughter, her heart full. "More than happy, my love. I'm home." As the evening breeze rustled the mango leaves above, Naomi realized that this wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of a new one where she was no longer just surviving, but building a legacy. And in the glow of the setting sun, the mansion on Bishop Adme Drive, once a place of fear, now stood as a house of hope, laughter, and second chances. Naomi's journey proves something we often forget: the strongest people don't always raise their voices, they raise the standard. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay. Because in staying, you may not just survive, you may change everything around you. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and perseverance can move mountains. Subscribe to True Echo for more unforgettable stories, and tell us in the comments, what does strength mean to you?